This is Mae Brussell. Sorry to turn off that beautiful music that we were just listening to, but it is now time for Talk Back with Mae. If you have questions that you want to ask me or information you have about programs that you have seen or will see during the week that are interesting, we share information about movies and subjects that are political. This is an hour and a half mainly of political subjects, anything that suits your fancy. I did get a request last week. A lady called in and wanted me to talk about Grenada, and I promised that I would do that this week, but sometimes I'm a terrible promise breaker, so you know that. I'm going to spend most of the hour on World Watchers on Edwin Meese because it's so important, and there may be a break in the hearings, Senate Judiciary, before the special prosecutor is signed on this case, if he doesn't leave before then, and I doubt if he will. So I am going to hit more on Edwin Meese because these broadcasts do go back east into other areas around the country, and I don't want to put it off. And he is a person who had a very big role in the suppression of news in relationship to Grenada, and he has an institution that was set up for him to teach people in the White House how not to give the news away. So I'm going to talk about the importance of him for the most part of the program, but I promise I will get back to the Grenada. And I will take subjects that if you want me to talk about them, that I will get into. It's just that Meese is so terribly important at this time. Also, I want to remind you, I don't know if I said at 7:30, we do at 8. It's KAZU FM in Pacific Grove, California, and it's Mae Brussell on Talk Back. You can call this station, 375-3082, if you have questions or things you want to share with me, as I say, and talk about the news as it's coming out. If you don't have anything to share, then I'll read some articles to you and bring up some subjects that may be of interest to you that are controversial, that are in the news. We don't often get to a chance to cover half the material that I'd like to in a given hour. And just this last week, there were so many news stories that I have a feeling we'd get lost in my files. Maybe there are one single article out of a whole section that I've discussed before in this program, or an update on something that I don't want to lose. And I thought, well, I don't know what to do with them. There's like 200 of these articles. I spread them all over on the bed, on tables, so that I see them. I'm afraid if they get in the filing cabinets, I'll lose sight of them. And so I decided I would just type them up and put them on labels. So I began with one page, which is 30 squares, the labels, then I can put them according to subject matter and pull them out later if I want. And then I did another sheet and another sheet. And there are about 120 top stories that I didn't want to lose track of. I'll take a call now, and then we'll get on to some of those maybe. Hello?
Hi, Mae.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. I was listening to the radio today and KGO, and they're talking about, in fact, it was an editorial comment on KGO about encouraging parents to sign up their children and fingerprint their children and get their ID cards to make it easier to find these poor little kids that are getting taken. And I couldn't help but think and remember back to one book in particular that I read on Nazi Germany and the how the Nazis would take children, German children as well as children in the occupied countries, and they would steal them away and raise them and or indoctrinate them in the ways that they would want to. And I couldn't help but wonder if there is that sort of thing happening all over again, where little kids are taken partly to
terrorize the neighborhoods and get
partly but to get raw material for the future, but also to give an excuse for these ID cards. And all that rigmarole and fingerprints and the computers and the da-da.
Well, once you read the history of Germany carefully, and you know what Santa Anna said, if you don't study history, it's going to be dumped on your lap, not to paraphrase it, but it's going to be your problem next if you don't know what they did, People don't like these direct quotations. They're so trite, like Jim Jones used to have that over his place. So let's paraphrase it and say, if you don't know what happened in the past, it's sure going to happen in the future or in the present. The story of terrorism, of, say, the Green Berets, the Special Forces, the magazines I read on Russia. When the Tsar was in Nazi Germany, they took great delight in teaching how to blow up bombs, how to bomb tunnels, how to take children, like you say, to terrorize families. And I even think one step further, the book Alternative 3, the kidnapping of people to test them and experiment on them for space stations, to adapting, up in the space shuttle and so forth. These missing children, the phenomena, I mean, one year it was 50,000, and last year it was almost 2 million. Now, 10,000 show up dead, and many are used for child pornography and for snuff movies, but in most of the instances where you got bombings or terrorism of major bank robberies, it did turn out to have Nazi connections, and if you really want to press laws that will be sure that you will be marked and labeled, the best way is to swoop down and take one or two children, like the two in San Francisco. There's one white and one black. That evens it out. And put their posters and pictures, a little boy and a little girl, and then create a situation where all the parents line their children up to be identified.
Right.
And, the thing is, like, once the child is identified, that means that every school has to enroll a child and look at the fingerprint to see whether it's been kidnapped. I mean, how does this go if you still take a child and want to raise it? How would they check it out even though the parent had a fingerprint? Where is the child going to be checked through?
Right. I really don't see how that the system that they're devising has much, it isn't very efficient for that reason.
No, the only thing, like, say, if you find a child in a ditch and it's been dead 3 months and there's no dental plates, you may say, well, look at the fingers, but that's so far-fetched. I really think that...
they're trying every way they can to get us used to the idea of having ID cards and
of missing our children. Along those lines, there's been a rash of terrorism around schoolyards in just the last month, if you've noticed, with school children. And I began to save those articles, like there's a whole bunch of people in front of the White House who have no way of getting to Reagan, but just a whole series of them to create this terror aspect to justify the concrete in Washington and elsewhere, But starting with the Jonestown case, there was this guy. Then there was a school shootout up north, and there was a fellow, a very, nice, educated person who was shot. He was in front of a school with guns, and they found a bow and arrow in his car. But he had a map of the school, which led me to believe that he didn't know where it was. He was supposed to be stalking the school for a week, but he wouldn't have to carry a map to show him how to get there unless somebody told him in the first place where it was.
A couple of weeks ago, Mae, on KGO, they were interviewing the mother of this Kevin. I forget his last name, Collins, I think. And some of the callers were asking her, were there any clues? Were there anything she could remember in the early hours of this investigation that seemed odd? She says, well, she thought for a minute. She says, there was a couple people on the scene, seen by other witnesses, that seemed a little odd. She says there was one guy, for example, that was dressed up like a monk. Mm-hmm. Now, these people are Catholics, Kevin and family. She said there was one fellow dressed up like a monk, and one lady called, that's right, there was a lady called, and she said, I saw this fellow dressed up like a monk, and I happened to look right at him, and he seemed to get real nervous, and he walked off real quick. Mm-hmm. There was that odd kind of incident. And then there was another person seen close to where Kevin was last seen. He said it was a tall, blonde man, a husky man with a German police dog on a leash. And those two incidences were the last witnesses that seemed close to Kevin. I mean, she didn't know what to make of it necessarily, but after thinking for a minute, she said, the police are following those two leads. They haven't gotten any place with him, but anyway, I couldn't help again to think of you see this guy dressed up like a monk, and you can't help but think of this
a squeaky frog with the cape and all that.
Yeah, or some kind of secret brotherhood, guys going around stealing kids.
The occult, yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, well, I think there's a reason to be concerned. I'm concerned about these schoolyard incidences, the shooting out of the fellow with the map, and the school's ready to start at the schoolyard. He's stalking the schools. There was one in Rome. There were 4 in the last week and a half. And we never had incidences around school children.
I can't help but see this as some huge orchestrated master plan to simply put the focus on the kids, and right now they're talking great guns with these ID cards and the fingerprints and the computers. I mean, it's so, if you're looking for it, it seems so likely that that's what's happening.
Yeah, well, it certainly will get the laws on the land, and then everyone will feel, in quotes, safe.
Yeah, and then we'll get used to the idea that, hey, maybe the adults should get cards too, and it's just
in case the body is found, and they yet haven't proved what good it would do, to have those cards on the kids, because where are you going to show them when you go into a theater or a supermarket, It's really...
Well, they want to do the same thing with the immigrants. With the so-called illegal aliens. They want to give them all ID cards, and that hasn't gone over quite in the Senate and in the House, but they sure are pushing on it hard.
Yeah.
It's they take each minority group one by one, and in the case of the illegal aliens, they seem to be a pain in the neck, so you single them out. Now, the kids, everyone loves their children, and they're going to be paranoid as the dickens when the kids start disappearing. So
yeah, it really is bad. They'll take like one child in New York, and they'll make a movie, and they'll have signs all over, and then everybody identifies with that single child and is willing to look at everybody and, like you say, get your fingerprints and get lined up, and without any certainty at all where this child went.
Right. And it's not a good system. I mean, even on a logical...
Well, I'd be scared. If I had small children today, I'd really be scared about, surveillance and having them out. I really don't think they're safe, because even if it's not who they say is doing it, they'll take them to prove a point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get off the line.
Okay, thanks a lot for calling. Okay, bye-bye. Do any of you have ideas on that subject, on these incidences around the schoolyard? And if you have, let me know, if you're interested in that. I think it's scary. I see a pattern. It's hard for people who don't read the history of Nazi Germany to see these patterns, and people that see the history are considered, like, when you bring up the subject, there's a lot of questions. Well, what are you talking about? And if you read the history, it's there. Hello?
Hello. Do you have any information on the Iran-Iraq war and the use of the poisonous gases?
Oh, on the Iran-Iraq, there's quite a battle of accusation going back and forth on the Iran-Iraq story. That Iraq thing first broke, first week in March, that Iraq was using chemicals and that the British were supplying them to fight Iran.
Right.
And today, this week, the week goes so fast I can't even keep track of time anymore. Iran said, look, if you're going to use poison gases, we're going to use them back. I saw those articles, and I got out of one of the books I had. Oh, it was William Shire's book, The Berlin Diary, which I'm rereading. It's just fascinating to see what was happening as a American journalist in Germany in the 30s, and he was describing in 1936, quite gloriously, if you look at it, how Mussolini had gone into Ethiopia, and all of Europe is entranced, and he said that they were using poison gases on the Ethiopians, and this was, the greatest thing, and nobody said anything in the Western world. He was writing for, I think it was the Chicago Tribune, and then the New York Times, the London Times. All these papers were covering stories about poison gas on Ethiopians. And now it's happening, in our own time. We make it. I don't know. They also say the French may be supplying Iraq
Yeah, I heard that the Russians were supplying them with it too, and they also sent in 1971. They had a group of the military advisors from Russia going to Iraq and training some of the Iraqi troops for chemical warfare. And something else that I was amazed at, the United Nations sent a mission to Iran last week, and they found out that actually they were using poisonous gas. And
On Iran, or Iraq is using on Iran? Or
Iraq is using on Iran, and they found that to be true too, and I read it in Le Monde, and that was the case. But the United Nations failed to condemn this act from the Iraqi side.
I know, but I think that the reason they did, I read that England and France were supplying it because they want to get rid of Khomeini, and they're doing it to the Iranians.
Right.
And so that the United Nations is so neutral. I mean, look what they're doing with our bloodbath in El Salvador and Guatemala and Nicaragua.
I don't think United Nations is neutral. United Nations is actually taking sides in the Iran-Iraq war.
In what way?
Well, in a way that at the beginning of the war, the United Nations failed to condemn Iraq for invading Iran.
Yes.
And again, after 4 or 5 months or later on, when the table turned around and Iran was winning, all of a sudden they started condemning Iran for fighting back. And saying, hey guys, you should stop and you shouldn't go into Iraq.
Yeah.
So why weren't they saying anything when Iraq invaded Iran? Why weren't they saying anything when Iraq was destroying Iranian cities to ground? They never said anything.
I know. Well, I once said, I think on a broadcast about, maybe a year ago, that General Motors supplies automobiles for Iraq, for every person from Iraq who's killed fighting in Iran.
Yeah.
They give the family a car, and our American Motors has made about $100 million just giving them cars. They take their oil money and buy American cars.
That's right. And on the other side, I heard that last year, United States gave $450 million to Iraq in terms of, I think, grain or food supply. And do you know if Iran is receiving any weapon from any Western countries?
Yes, I think even the United States trades with them. I have some articles about the United States to send some things.
Where do you get the articles from, Irene?
I looked them up and pulled them out. I was just really surprised, the United States, because they keep screaming about Iran and the shopping out, and yet the United States has been supplying them with some major supplies.
Right.
You see, most of these countries are just whores. They'll sell to both sides. They'll sell Iraq and they sell Iran, and I don't know if you've been watching that TV series on Sidney Riley, but he worked with Basil Zaharoff, and there was a book called Merchants of Death about Zaharoff, and Samuel Cummings took over his place. He was in the CIA's in London with his offices in Monte Carlo, and all they do are Frank Turple and Edwin Wilson and the American CIA. As long as they sell guns, they just as soon sell both sides and let them kill each other off because they don't care. The world is populated and they make the money.
Right.
They're not even thinking of the politics.
But they should really see the consequence of that. If Iran wins the war with Iraq, the Saudi Arabian oil fields, the Kuwaiti oil fields, all those oil fields are going to be threatened by Iran.
Yeah.
And that's also, that's definitely damaging to the health of the United States interest in that region.
Yeah, but you also damage the United States interest by allowing poison gases, because once they get really mad, they'll fight against us to the end, like they were mad about the Shah. I don't think any of this State Department policy, thanks to Henry Kissinger and his gang, in every country, it's decimated everyone. I don't think it ever goes forward.
Yeah.
I don't think, I just read Japan wants to give China nuclear weapons, nuclear power. That was in the paper this week. What purpose should any of them have it?
Yeah.
Pakistan or South Africa, nuclear bombs someday, we're going to be in the middle. If they don't drop them on our head, they'll at least drop them between each other and we'll get all the residue.
But do you see anything decisive coming out of this battle, Iran-Iraq battle?
Well, it's sort of a stalemate. They pump oil like mad, and they turn all their oil money into war. And I truly believe that one of the reasons that we feed both of them is to keep them fighting each other. See, if the Muslim world, Saudi Arabia is run by a handful of families, just like the Shah ran Iran.
Right.
And if the Arabs were united, they may overthrow the Saudis and Kuwait and the American oil supplies and use it for themselves. See, turn their own oil into food products, which the Shah does, and he doesn't import, not Shah, the Khomeini doesn't import food anymore, and so forth. What the advantage of having them fight each other is that they don't have time to look at us.
Right, right.
Or at Saudi Arabia. So I think that the whole purpose of that war is to supply, say, the Muslims or the Syrians and supply the Lebanese and the PLO and let them just keep fighting each other. Because if they ever sat down and figured out, you know, what the British Empire did to them or what the United States did to them, and they turned on us, there'd be a Muslim world from North Africa to the Philippines.
Yeah, there'll be a whole big superpower itself.
That's right.
Muslim country.
So what I think the advantage of keeping them on their guard, see, and then if one of them gets really mean, then we send in the troops and grab the oil and say that's for national security. Once they whittle themselves down, that there's nothing left for them except some fresh oil to pump, then we come in quotes, to save them. See?
Do you think the United States will get involved if Iran tries to close the Persian Gulf?
Oh, sure.
You think they really have the power to do so?
Yeah, as long as you have enough bombs to drop on their head, you can do it.
Yeah.
You have the atomic bomb, and you have these missiles, and Israel's got bombs to spare, and that's why we arm Israel, and that's why I think we don't want to give weapons to Jordan. I don't think it's because Reagan's nice. I think he wants them to appear weak and be on the brink of despair so we can come rescue.
Right, exactly.
See, it's like the lady on the railroad tracks in the old movies.
Yeah.
Like, he has nothing against Jordan, and he would want them strong against Iran, but he wants them all nervous, so just say, okay, Jamal's out and Jordan's restless, right?
Right.
So in comes
Reagan on his white horse.
a Reagan on his white horse to save them,
Yeah.
and put another Christian government back in, like Hussein and Jamal. See, but they have to get down on their knees and suffer a little first, so that he doesn't look aggressive.
Yeah. But my final thing is that I think that the Iran-Iraq war started because the United States lost such a great interest in Iran and couldn't tolerate the Iranian government, so they kind of jacked up Iraq to attack Iran, so they destabilized the Iranian government. So at the same time, the Mujahideen from inside Iran have a chance to get back at the government and install another pro-CIA government in Iran, like what they did to Shah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that we saw, remember when Khomeini came in, we said he's going to die of cancer in a month. We said the people will revolt against him. He survived 5 years, and we never could figure that out. So we've got to, if we give them, even like you say, well, why are we giving guns to Iran? So that Iran will fight Iraq, and then we will someday have to step in, you see. And so we're arming both sides. Our economy needs it, and it keeps them not turning on Saudi Arabia.
Right. Yeah, but if they win the war, I see that coming pretty soon.
Well, eventually they can win the war, because American dollars and American sneakiness, we don't have a foreign policy.
Yeah.
So eventually we have to lose.
Yeah.
You know, there's an economist on television this morning who wrote a book called American Disease, and he was from Harvard, and it's how all of our corporations are moving out of this country, the factories are out of this country, our trade deficit is off like $20 billion, and we don't have any motivation for our workers like they do in every other country where they're happy or content, you know, and he's an American establishment who's complaining about, you know, the system that we have here. And then you hear somebody like Mitterrand come over, and he gives a speech, you know, in Washington or in San Francisco, and he's so cultured compared to Reagan. I mean, how can we win with clowns like that as statesmen? You know?
Yeah.
Who would believe it? every time they see him and Nancy, I mean, they just must really crack up, and all the pollution, all the crimes here. So we can't win eventually, with people like Lyndon Johnson and Nixon and Reagan as president of America. It just has to keep sinking until some people catch on that we have to get back to having statesmen. And we have to make compromises. That Barbara Tuchman has a new book out. She's written books on history. She's an expert on history. And this book is about the follies of history and the fact how we make the wrong mistakes. Countries have made the wrong mistakes through the years when they had an alternate way to go and didn't take it and refused to pull back, refused to push ahead at any cost, that we didn't reappraise what we were doing.
Right.
See, when we put in the Shah, who's so militaristic, we put in the Savak, we force them to import their food, take away the farm growing, military police, then you're going to get somebody who's strong to counteract that. You're not going to get a cultured statesman because his head would have been cut off long ago. You had his own just as conniving as the Shah. So when we put in these people like Marcos of the Philippines or the president of South Korea or the Pinochet in Chile, these barbarians, we're going to have to deal with those societies later.
Right. It's gonna come soon.
It's going to come back at us. So that's why I'm always for moderation and change while it's possible instead of a big temper tantrum or a violent revolution that takes all power away from us, without any control.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, good night.
Well, that's, I don't know if you mind my answering or having a long conversation with a few people or whether you rather have a few quick conversations continuously, but I think it's kind of interesting and better if you didn't get a chance to call or if you don't get a chance. It's Mae Brussell. It's, the phone number is 375-3082. But I do like to talk with you individually, and we'll take one more call now for about 4 minutes before World Watchers. Hello?
Hi, Mae. How you doing?
Okay.
I want to let listeners know that the devil himself, Henry Kissinger, is going to be appearing in San Jose Wednesday night.
Oh, yes. Oh, Mr. Kissinger. That's right. I forgot to announce that here. It'll be too late to put on the World Watchers. Let me explain. Well, there's some people that listen next hour. I'm trying to go up there. It's this Wednesday. Henry Kissinger is going to be at the Santa Clara Dental Society.
At the Hyatt House.
Yeah, if you have a telephone, if you have a pencil and write, 286-8085, you might call the Dental Society and ask them, are they honoring Kissinger because all the electronic devices are put in teeth for mind control?
Really?
That's why I think they're having it. It's going to be at the San Jose Hyatt at the Bayshore Freeway. This is Wednesday at 8:30. I'm going to try and be up there at 6:30. I typed up a sheet on both sides with a description of Adolf Kissinger and Henry and his friend Fritz Kramer and a lot of information on just two sides. Somebody up there is making about 500 copies to pass around at the hotel and around San Jose. If there's anybody locally who wants to go up with me, I may go up if you want to. Call me. I was mentioned, I'm glad you called up. I forgot to announce that. Call at the house, 624-9103. I'm listed in the book if you don't have a pencil. If any of you want to go up there for that, I think people will be out in front around 6:30.
Yeah, they're asking like $65 a head if you want to be one of the privileged to sit inside and listen to it.
Yeah, if you want to puke. It's almost worth it if I could get a ticket to go inside and then start throwing these sheets around about and passing them down the table.
Yeah, I'd almost pay to see that, too.
$65. Well, let me think about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a contribution.
It's once in a lifetime, probably.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. If anybody wants to go, if there's a game you want to go up, I may go up Wednesday.
Yeah, there should be a good turnout, at least on the outside.
Oh, that's great. I hope so. Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Oh, yeah, I forgot to announce that. I talked about it at De Anza College, but I didn't. The weeks went so fast that we were going to have signs made and have a big demonstration, and all of a sudden, this March 28th came on to me too fast. The Bayshore Freeway, it's March 28th. Henry Adolf Kissinger is going to be at the Dental Society talking about mind control in the Fourth Reich, how you put electrodes into people's teeth and control their brains, and he's going to thank the Dental Society. Now, there's a call there, but I can't take it because we begin World Watchers in 1 minute. So you'll have to call back next week. Last week, the phone kept ringing when I was doing the program, and I wondered, oh, my gosh, maybe the recording machine isn't on or something. But I can't take calls now because we're beginning the World Watchers. So call back next week, and if you want to go up there with me, let me know, and we'll arrange that. I will try to go up there, and we'll see what we can do. It would be kind of nice to go up there. And next week or so, or week or two, I'll do the Grenada, but I just can't do it this week. As I said, we'll get back to it later.